Perfect. So thank you everyone for coming to our training section focus corner. My name is Naomi. I'm a fourth year neurology resident in Ottawa, and I'm one of the trainee leadership section team members. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited about the session that we have organized for all of you today. This year has been very challenging to say the least, and COVID has tested us all in so many ways. And these unprecedented times has led to so much uncertainty for so many of us, and increased stress levels and fatigue, strain at work and strain in our relationships in so many other ways. And it's done so while limiting so many of our coping mechanisms, whether it be ability to go see friends and family or ability to go to the gym. It's just really put a strain on a lot of our areas of our lives. And for trainees in particular, it brings extra challenges because many of us have increased responsibilities at work, or many of us are trying to apply to careers or apply to fellowships, and it just adds so many extra layers of difficulty to that. So we just thought it was really important to have a dedicated session on wellness and trying to avoid burnout during COVID for trainees specifically, and just to also allow us a kind of a safe space to talk about what's been going on and to build a bit of a sense of community between us. So that's why we wanted to dedicate this hour to the great title, Avoiding Burnout and Maintaining Wellness in an Unprecedented Time of Strain. So how this session is going to work is we have two lovely presenters. So they're going to each speak for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then after that, we hope to have a question and answer session, which will just allow us a bit of an opportunity to discuss the topic, and whether it be questions or whether you want to share a story for yourself, anything is welcome. And we really hope that it will be an interactive session. So just a couple notes on how to ask questions. So as you saw, Ali already had this up, but please, if you could just check off the setting to hide non-video participants, it just allows you to only have the screen for the person who's speaking. And then there's two main ways to ask questions. So either you can submit questions through the chat window itself, and if that's the case, then I'll ask the question. But the other way, if you would like to kind of be more interactive and ask the question yourself, if you click on participants at the bottom, there's a raise hand function. So if you do that, I'll call on you when it's your turn, and you can unmute your microphone at that point, and that will allow you to ask your question or share your story, whatever it may be. But in the meantime, we just ask that all participants have their microphones muted and also their videos off when you're not speaking, if possible. And we'll just kind of help navigate that as well. Perfect. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And so our first presenter, our first speaker is Dr. Thea Gallagher. So Dr. Thea Gallagher is an assistant professor and director of the outpatient clinic at the Center for Treatment and Study of Anxiety at I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. She completed her Doctor of Psychology and Clinical Psychology at the Philadelphia School of Osteopathic Medicine. Dr. Gallagher joined the Center for the Treatment and Study of Anxiety in 2014 after the completion of her clinical internship at Holcomb Behavioral Health Systems. At the Center for the Treatment and Study of Anxiety, Dr. Gallagher currently coordinates the OCD treatment study and is a study therapist. She also serves as the media coordinator. Clinically, Dr. Gallagher specializes in prolonged exposure therapy for PTSD, exposure and response prevention for OCD, and cognitive behavioral treatments for social anxiety, panic disorder, specific phobias, and generalized anxiety. I will turn off my video and I will give the floor to Dr. Gallagher.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I say one of the interesting kind of good parts of the pandemic is that I really feel like it's shed a light on mental health, and so people are interested and wanting to talk about it. So it's like a global pandemic for us to really start breaking stigma and kind of breaking down these, our personal and professional lives were pretty separate. We'd find out what were you doing this weekend, where are you going on vacation, and now we're like, how are you holding up? Like, how's it going with your, kids in Zoom school? Like, how's this week in particular for you emotionally? So, I think it's really been nice to see and nice to have these opportunities to talk about something I've been passionate about for a long time, but it feels extremely relevant. So, so it seems like I have it till about like 3:25. So I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. All right. Well, it's coming up. I think this topic of, stress, burnout, and resilience is extremely important. Um, and we're going to talk about how to identify it and then also um, what we're going to do about it. All right. So it should be here. Screen. All right. Are you guys able to see that?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, great. So yeah, stress, burnout, and resilience in COVID-19. So some of the signs, that people are starting to experience, and I call this phase 2 of COVID, and we might even be heading into like a phase 3, but I think in phase 1, many of us experienced this enormous shift in our lives. One day things seemed to be pretty run-of-the-mill, using a bit more hand sanitizer, hearing a lot about COVID-19, and it kind of seemed like mid-March, our world's really changed significantly, and many people are pretty resilient in crisis mode, and we're able to adjust and pivot and figure out, what do I have to do? How do I manage this? Okay, this is for the foreseeable future. What does this look like? What does this take? And then I think people started to settle into the fact that our lives were, really going to be changed for a significant period of time and all that came along with that. How our work-life balance changed, how our work lives changed, how our home lives changed, our personal lives, our social lives. So some of the signs I think that people have been experiencing or maybe starting to experience in a significant way, feelings of fear, anxiety, stronger emotions, people saying, hey, I'm crying more than I ever have cried before. I'm not even a crier. Or I'm more irritable with my children. I'm having more swings than I usually have. Another kind of thing that people, we've had immense change in our lives, things that our world does not look like it did a year ago. I played this game with, people in my life. I'm like, yeah, like just imagine flash forward to this football game a year ago that you're watching on TV, or flash forward to this event, and what would you have thought or, imagine? And now it's, again, something we adapt to. We're very adaptable, which is great, but also sometimes we adapt and we don't see that we've adapted, we're able to get things done, but we're not managing it as well as we used to. And then the idea is, there is overwhelm, just feeling like there's a lot more to manage, and workplace stress. I don't know if this has been true for any of you, but for many of us, we're navigating basically a whole new landscape of what our job looks like. There have been changes in policy. There have been changes in procedures. If you're at the leadership level, you're having to maintain a lot of email communication about these things. There's many more emails that go back and forth. Things don't get kind of solved or handled over a meeting in the same way. Someone brought to my attention even our interactions with colleagues. I don't know if some of you are still in a physical building, but even people that are in a physical building say it feels different, especially if you're wearing PPE and other things are going on. But if you're not in the physical building too, we're having less interactions about like, how was your weekend? What are you eating for lunch? Do you want to go grab a coffee? All of our interactions are kind of transactional. Like when we need something, when something's going wrong. And, my friend was saying he's starting to experience some anxiety about like when a colleague reaches out to him. And I thought that was so interesting. And then I started to observe it with my own colleagues and kind of, oh my gosh, am I even asking about like, oh, like, what's your 6-month-old doing now developmentally, or, kind of the normal questions that we would ask, or the things that we would ask. We don't have those same, pleasantries that we had before. And I think a lot of things are adding to this workplace stress. So some of the symptoms, irritation is such an interesting one because it's not really like, an emotion, and you're kind of the one that looks like a jerk. So it's easy to, put it on yourself, like, so I'm just not in a good place. But really, irritation is typically an indication that something's not going right, that something is challenging, something is difficult. You're not managing. When you have a shorter fuse, it's typically because other parts of you are being impinged upon, considerably, like your cognitive and emotional load. We have more just resting on that, more taking up space than we've had before. Also feeling uncertain, nervous, or anxious. I think many of us, even who thought we had maybe the most stable jobs or the most, that the most kind of simple, like day to day, things are feeling uncertain. We don't know what's going to come next. Even I think a lot of the students I've worked with, like they've been in upheaval of like, we're going to go back to school. We're not going to go back to school. We're going to go back to school. Things are going to change last minute. So, that's something I think that many of us are feeling, or even uncertain, if you go to an event, like you go to like a socially distanced event and, with some friends, and then maybe you felt like, okay, I'd be fine with this, and then maybe somebody isn't following the rules and you start to feel a little nervous or uncertain, or, you start to question yourself when you're around maybe people in your life who are more vulnerable, and, who was I around? What did I do? Am I going to contaminate someone else? Am I putting my kids at risk if I send them to school? Am I putting my family at risk if I do thus and such? So there's a lot of uncertainty which causes that anxiety. There's also, uncertainty about what our lives are going to look like moving forward, what our jobs are going to look like, what our holidays are going to look like, what events are going to look like. We've also been noticing across the board in some of the preliminary research, there's really this amotivation, not feeling as motivated to do the things that we used to feel motivated to do, because I think the emotional fatigue, feeling overwhelmed. Also, I think we're not doing a great job across the board of, this is anecdotal, but I can only imagine, because I've seen it across board, and the more I do these resilience groups, I see, we're really not good at giving each other praise for the things that we are doing, and instead of like thinking about the things we're not doing, or this fell through the cracks, or this needs to get handled, or, and just really kind of emphasizing this idea that like 70 is the new 100 and 70 is a lot, and to give people credit for what they are doing. Many people are managing, being teachers at home while also trying to work. Many people are managing like complete isolation, which which isn't what they want in life. So it really causes a lack of motivation, feeling, tired, overwhelmed, burnout. And I think that links back with this irritation, where like one small email like sends you over the top, or feels like I can't deal with this anymore. Also, like feeling sad or depressed, even thinking about the social unrest in our world, some of the, even like current weather challenges that people are, experiencing. But also just, again, the election cycle that's upcoming. We know from the last election cycle there was a lot of anxiety and stress documented, not just about the election, but also about like social media platforms, watching your family members fight, seeing the tension. We're internalizing a lot of that. It's really hard to kind of turn that off. And then we have noticed, very significantly, sleep has been affected. Some of that could be attributed to less structure and space between work and home, less time being outside, more stress and anxiety, feeling like less of a routine. I can wake up later because I don't have to go into the office, but then also like stretching that to a point that you don't have structure. Also drinking more, things like that, and trouble concentrating. So I'm going to kind of speed ahead here. These are all the things that we, really talked about. Your concern of the risk of exposure, taking care of your personal and family needs while working, managing a completely different workload. For some of us, even if you were in an administrative role, I can say personally there was aspects of my administrative role that I really liked, and aspects I'm realizing like during the pandemic I don't like as much, because it's kind of changed and it's less personal, and I can't just go into someone's office and, ask them how things are going. It does feel like it feels different. And then, lack of access to the tools and equipment. Many of us have gone fully virtual without, a rollout of here's, updated equipment, or, the highest speed internet, or an office space. And then also feeling like you're not contributing enough to work, or guilt about not being on the front line. Maybe guilt even about like, I'm not doing my job as well as I used to. And then uncertainty about the future of the workplace, like we talked about, learning new communication tools and dealing with technical difficulties, adapting to a different workspace and or work schedule. So here are some ways to manage the stress. And I think, I'm very anti this concept of like, toxic positivity. Like here are the tips and tricks to, fix COVID and feel a lot better. It's really like saying like, we can say both that this time sucks and 2020 has, been really challenging. And also like, I don't want to like bury my head in the sand or go to bed for the rest of 2020. So how do I make, the most of it how do I control what I can control and manage the aspects of my life I can manage in spite of the dumpster fire that is 2020. And so I think, it's about kind of identifying, like it's about shifting the way that we look at ourselves and our world. We're kind of like the frog in the water. Many of us haven't realized like, oh yeah, this has been a big change, but like it's been a massive change. Recently, I'm a data person. I just sat down and I wrote down everything that's changed in my job since the pandemic happened and everything that's changed in my life. And it was really amazing to see like, A, I've adapted pretty well considering, but B, it's okay that there are some days where this is extremely challenging because how many things, that's a lot to manage. And, as people, managing change is really difficult. So it's good to identify the things that are causing stress, like what in my week is like the hardest thing for me to do, or what is the hardest, like I have to really like work up the motivation to do, and what comes more easily or I feel good afterward. I think sometimes I've said like, the patient care for me feels really great and enriching and it feels good to have an impact. And then some of the TDM or like the emailing that like feels endless can start to feel stressful. And so talking openly with employers, employees, and unions about like how it's affecting work, expectations should be communicated clearly. I think even just making a space for mental health and making a space, say like, here, we're going to have a group like this to talk about it. We're going to discuss it. Our leaders are saying, hey, we are worried about your mental health and concerned about all of ours. So like, let's make it a priority to identify this. Let's talk about racial injustice. Let's talk about social unrest. Let's talk about what's challenging for all of us now. Asking about how to access mental health resources in your workplace through Penn. We have Penn Cobalt, which has, which is how even we're able to roll out groups like this. But it's felt really great that Penn has stepped up and provided those resources to providers and to resilience groups and to mindfulness and things like that. So take advantage of those if you can. And identify the things that you don't have control over and do the best with the resources available to you. Allowing, sorry, I know I'm running out of minutes, so I'll just speed up quickly. I think many people kind of at this point know what we need to do about COVID, but here's just kind of some of my punchy sound bites. Really, limit the time that you're watching the news on social media. We're saying no more than 10 minutes a day of the news, and then also with social media, which is now becoming like news and like election drama. If you're looking at cat memes and that's really, making you happy, do that. But really identify, do some non-judgmental observation of yourself. When do I feel good? Do I feel good after I did this? Do I feel bad after I did this? Creating some structure in your life, creating a routine, writing it down, giving yourself credit for the things that you did do during the day, not the things that you didn't do. Trying to make a space for working out, even if it's 20 to 30 minutes a day. Also trying to get outside. Reflectively, reflecting on how you feel and even doing that in some writing form. They say like even like 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, no editing, just writing how you feel can be super effective and helpful with your physical health, your mental health. Now's a great time to get a therapist. So if you want a therapist, it's easier to fit it in. It's one thing, scheduling is a little bit easier with those kind of things because less travel and commute. So if that's something that you think is something I've always wanted, now is the time to, reach out to those resources. And, it's great even if you say, I don't know if I need this, but like, let me see if this could be helpful. And watch out for the common pitfalls of, misusing alcohol or other drugs or, kind of social isolation. Finding, pushing yourself, even if you are afraid to do something socially in a socially distanced way or outside, but really it is important for us. Social isolation we know is correlated with higher depression, suicidality. Here's some resources. I'll stop there and hopefully I'll answer some questions as you guys come back because I have a lot of thoughts about all of this. And
thank you, Thea. That was fantastic. I found especially your point just about our different interactions at work and how our actions at work are now more of a transaction instead of having kind of that social relationships with people that we work with and kind of pleasantries and how that affects us at the workplace. It's very interesting. So we'll take questions at the end. Thank you so much. That was great. So our next speaker is Carolina Maciel. So she's the director for the Neurocritical Care Division at the University of Florida, Gainesville, and holds a research faculty positions at Yale University and the University of Utah. She is a member of the AAN Clinical Research Subcommittee and the American Heart Association Stroke Early Career Committee. She is triple boarded in neurology, neurocritical care, and critical care EEG, and her academic interests include developing team science to tackle complex scientific questions in the neurocritically ill. Her areas of scientific focus include neuroprognostication, secondary brain injury mechanisms, and the critical care management of the potential organ donor. Her favorite words are resilience, equity, equality, and love. As a native Brazilian, Carolina enjoys spending her time off soaking up the sunshine while devouring a book. Thank you, Carolina, for joining us.
Thank you. Just a quick correction. I am not the director of the Neuro ICU here at University of Florida. I just direct the research endeavors of our division. But thank you. This talk that Dr. Gallagher gave, it was I was taking notes, and I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. I think us as neurointensivists and neurointensivist wannabes, we are so into having control, right? One of the things that draw us to the field is actually having control of compliance, right? Medication goes in no matter what. Is it in the veins, per rectum, per whatever tube, we figured it out, right? It goes in. And with the whole pandemic, a lot of control for routine aspects of our lives are taking it away from us, not only personally, but in the hospital, administratively, teaching, it's like our ability to actually hang out tonight. And for those of you guys that know me, that every meeting I actually sneak away and do a whole day of massage and my nails and blah, blah, blah. So not being able to actually carve out that space for you to do the things that that refill your pot, I would say, and actually this happening in a really fast pace and catching us all by surprise it makes us so vulnerable to burnout. And in addition to that, we are another point that she made of just writing it down, right? Writing it down so that you can actually see the concrete things that you overcame. I love to-do lists, and just for the fact that I can go there and click that I did something, so you feel that you are working hard several days in a row away from the ICU, and you're like, wait, what did I do with my time? So having this is just like a way of giving kudos to yourself, even if it didn't translate yet to that big milestone. But those little chunks of things actually are so helpful. And I think it goes a long way for our personality as well, right? As an intensivist, we like to see the result of our effort, our decision, our plan of care. We want to see it right away. So I think those are the things that resonate so much to the neurointensivist soul for taking care of each other. And the therapy. Guys, I don't know. I started therapy in February, and it was not because of the pandemic, because at that time I was like, is it really, I'm going to come here? I don't know. Although Floridians, right? Floridians are quite stupid. So, of course, it came to Florida really badly. But I started therapy in February, and I do once a week. 60 minutes. It is an investment indeed. But then you can have taking out of your deductible, and then it gets cheaper. Figured it out, because it's money, and money is short always, right? So figured it out, but there is a way. And now I feel that I want to do this forever, being able to lay it out, everything that you are feeling, and actually have that help, that's safe space to allow you to get to know yourself even further, to delve deeper of what are your limits and how much are you respecting your limits and how much you're actually pushing it away and away and disrespecting your limits, which just contribute to more burnout risk, right? I think it is incredible and allows you also to perhaps digest the intensity of our job a little bit better and the interactions that we have, and bring a little bit less home, those things. I feel that during the weeks that I am in the ICU, that I give like 150% to the families, to the patients, to whomever team is around me that needs me. And then I am physically exhausted at around 10 p.m. and coming back home. And you just cannot sleep, despite the fact that you are completely exhausted. And I realized that this wired state that we get from working several hours in the ICU, saving lives or losing the battle, but dealing with all the emotional thrill that you get from rescuing a brain code during an ICP crisis, or breaking the news of brain death to that mother or father, it really wears you down. And being able to identify things that can actually allow this release of energy, so then you can actually rest not only your body but your mind, is profoundly helpful. I think with the exercise, and now we have to just be creative, right? Like, what can we do in this setting? Like, yes, exercising is super important. And you have to figure it out, something that actually resonates with you. And if you are a competitive kind of person, those services that have signatures that you can actually compare your progress, I think they make sense. If you are a more outdoorsy person, then, it depends on where you are at, right? But try to seek for that. But I feel that we are spread so thin, and the ability to actually reach out to that decision and maintain that habit, because starting a habit is easy, right? I find it particularly challenging to just keep on with the habit. So going back and analyzing yourself a little bit without the judgment. I love that Dr. Gallagher put that back. What was that? Can you unmute yourself? Unjudging identification. What was it? I love.
Oh, non-judgmental observation.
Yes, non-judgmental observation. Exactly. So you kind of identify those things, get to know your body, get to know yourself. So then when are you gonna, or how are you potentially gonna sabotage yourself, right? So I had to, prior to the pandemic, I had to change a lot of stuff in my life. So I had never exercised in my life, like really 0, for reals. And then I needed to start exercising to feel empowered for my recovery. I had cancer last year. So I decided to row, because it was, not anybody, not that many people row. I thought it was interesting. In all honesty, I thought that the machine was beautiful and it would be beautiful in my office. That was actually how I chose my rowing machine. It is that water rower from, did you guys watch House of Cards? Yes, no, maybe. Frank Underwood and that beautiful wife of his. Yeah. Exactly. That's the one. So I bought it because of that, right? There we go. Attending salary for the first time, like I'm going to buy a Frank Underwood water rower machine. But anyhow, I bought it and discovered, that the whooshing sound, I can only afford Frank Underwood text message notification sound. There are refurbished ones. Seriously, no, don't. It is a good investment. If you think about it, how much it costs for the gym, though, subscription and the kind of stuff. Knock on the table. So I was rowing because I felt that actually your whole core is it's being exercised. 20, 30 minutes, you're actually feeling that the sweat, you're getting the cardio out of it. And the whooshing sound actually of the water is so relaxing. For some people, it might not be, you know, fun. And actually, in all honesty, quickly, I was like, oh, okay, here I go, just, you know, pushing this thing for 20, 30 minutes. That's so annoying. When this is going to go away, you know, the whooshing sound, I was like, oh, fuck this whooshing sound. I don't care about this anymore. And that was like beginning the pandemic. And then I realized that there was this whole universe of ergata, which is similar to the Peloton for the bikers, that other people row and then log in how many meters you have been rowing for. And then you have all these different workouts that you can actually do, just arms, and then like going like this, and different muscle groups, and then some abs, and then some races. And now poor Puya and my group keep getting texts from me like in the evening. They're like, I am number 9 now of my age group and weight group or whatever. So you have to identify what actually brings an additional joy. So then when you were a little bit, oh yes, exactly, they're totally my cheerleaders. So when you get over that hump of the excitement of the thing that is new that you you were not used to do, and then you are over it, and now it's something part of the routine. Try to identify something that it is that makes it the thrill a little bit there, so it sticks the habit. So I would say that piece of exercising has been incredibly helpful for me. And the other thing that I would say to deal with this whole freaking pandemic is find what it is, the activity, at least once a day, that brings a little bit of normalcy to your life, meaning an activity that you can perhaps have time without wearing a mask, depending, of course, depending on where you're at. Or, that long hot shower, if you can manage to find the time, read the book, really whatever kind of rocks your boat and gives you that sense of tranquility. It's funny that last year, so I've been living here in Gainesville, Florida this is the 4th year. And I was renting a house that had a pool, and I have a almost 4-year-old. And I was like, okay, so the pool, actually, we use the pool for 8 months out of the year. There's 4 months that we are not using the pool, so it's time to buy a house. I'm going to buy a house without a pool because I don't want to take care of the pool, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, right, what happens? Then a pandemic comes, and then I don't get to go to the club for the sun. And here is the Brazilian that enjoy. The one thing that I enjoy for relaxing is actually spending time in the sun. And then I can go to the beach. I can go to the club for the sun. So you got to figure it out. Again, what it is inside you that will get a little bit of normalcy, a little bit of control, a little bit of refilling that tank back, and identify outlets, different outlets for how you're feeling. So I cannot stress enough, therapy. I am going to stick with my therapist for however long it takes during my whole life, because it is not just going to be a pandemic thing. Exercise to get rid of all that energy, and talk to each other, right? We are all in the same boat. One of the positive things of the pandemic that I think is people are a little less, I feel, less defensive, you know. We are all kind of struggling, and we are all acknowledging that we are struggling. So hearing from other people that are also struggling, and then perhaps identifying or not with different coping mechanisms may rock your boat so as well. That's all that I have to share.
That was great. Thank you so much. That was very helpful. I think especially, you know, what you said about finding new outlets and finding new ways to get tranquility, because a lot of us maybe used to find that by seeing friends or family or, you know, with very specific activities, and trying to find ways to adjust with that in our new lives, I think is really important. So thank you. Thank you, both of you. So now we have about 20 minutes for questions or for opportunities to people to share their thoughts or to share their stories. So I'll just remind everyone there's two ways to ask questions. So either if you want, you can post in the Zoom group chat and then I can read out your questions. Or if you'd like, you can also use the raise hand function, and then I can kind of call you out when it's your turn, and feel free to unmute your microphone at that point and turn on your video just to have it be a little bit more interactive. And it looks like Puya has already turned on his video. So maybe we'll start with Puya. It looks like you might have a question.
I just want to say thank you to both of you for taking the time to share your experiences and your expertise. Carolina is probably the only person I know that can mention having cancer before the pandemic as an afterthought. I don't know if you guys caught that. But I think she is one of the people who has probably the most developed coping mechanism structure of anybody that I know, so I'm very happy that you were here to kind of share your experiences and be so genuine about how you felt and, all of your
How I felt, oh fuck, that's how I felt.
What did you say?
Because that's life, right? Life happens right there and then, right? And you're like, okay, so now I am dealing with this, sure. And then a pandemic, oh, okay, now a pandemic, yeah, sure, now we're doing, but this is life, right? This is life.
And Dr. Gallagher, I just wanted to reiterate Naomi's point about how, this isn't really a question, it's more of like a comment, how our interactions at work have become less about like, what did you do last weekend? And, we all sat at home, is what we did. And so we don't really ask those things. And I think those are a big part of how we develop relationships and connect with each other. And connecting with each other is how we cope with a lot of things. And so I really wanted to just say that resonated a lot with me. And I think that, if I had to take away something from it, I would say that I'm going to try to do my best to connect with people and ask those questions about what they did and how they're coping and how they're feeling despite the pandemic. And I think that might, at least take a small step towards feeling a little bit more normal. I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice action step, and one that when I'm like, oh yeah, we're not talking about those things. But it's also like, I'm not reaching out either. I'm not reaching out and saying like, how was your weekend? What's going on? And so I've started just calling a couple of my colleagues throughout the week, and we have like even I think just a little conversation. And even if my daughter's running around in the background, it doesn't have to be like a formal call, but it's just nice to touch base. And I get my one colleague, she's like, oh, I'm in like a funk this week. Everything about work is like stressing me out. And, just having that place where you can, talk to each other. And it was just a nice observation that someone kind of brought to my attention. And I was like, wow, like, that is something that's significantly shifted. And I think we're still trying to identify what makes this hard. Because some of us are like, some aspects of this I like, and like they're giving me flexibility. But then, even the preliminary data is showing people are working more than they've worked before. And so that's also like, yeah, we have more flexibility and fewer boundaries. And so then when you observe these things, what do you do about them? So I think, yeah, talking to people about things that aren't just work related, and then having stronger and stricter boundaries of, home and work life, and really, taking physical separation from your devices and then also having like taking off notifications, these simple steps that sometimes I'm like, is this really like that big of a revelation? But when you actually do it, I think it makes a big difference.
And having like carving space for laughing, right? I feel that a lot of the times, because the interactions are, as you pointed out, transactions, right? And doing this, oftentimes the spontaneity of a story, an impromptu story, it's hard to come across. So carving that space for sharing, even if it is for making fun of the mess we're in, and identifying, that's another thing that I think this pandemic makes me realize, and perhaps, I don't know where you guys at in your time of your career, if you are selecting a fellowship place or selecting a job or in between jobs, or if you are happy with your job and helps you identify, you are stuck with this group of people, right? And perhaps you can choose better with whom you're going to work with whom you're going to, spend time and share these difficulties, so you can cope together a little bit better.
Great, thank you. So we have a couple hands up. So I think Sina, your hand was up first. So feel free to unmute your microphone and ask your question or share your comment.
Thank you so much. First, I just want to thank the speakers. I feel like your perspective and points are tremendously appreciated. And I think even without a pandemic, I think the work we do is so emotionally intense that I found therapy to be useful even before COVID times. One thing that I have sort of focused on since fellowship has begun is trying to separate things that I can't control from what I can't control, right? And I think that, if you look at it from the patient's perspective, like the patient and their families are in the ultimate example of a situation they can't control. But like taking a step back, like I feel that the providers are also in scenarios where, terrible unexplained things happen. You have to have difficult conversations with people. And you can't just go home and switch off immediately. And now with the pandemic, I sort of notice, there are sort of palpable levels of tension among everybody else where it's like, some attendants have young kids and like, kids are in the house now. And like, everybody's under some element of stress and it just keeps building. And, I try to be understanding of the overall circumstance, but I just wonder at one point, how is it possible to separate out things that you can't control in an empowering way versus feeling a certain kind of melancholy that I'm just giving up to this or I'm acquiescing to this and I'm just lowering my standards of what I accept.
Dr. Gallagher, you're the expert.
I mean, I think, so I couldn't hear you right at the end. Can you just reiterate like the last sentence you said?
I was saying that I think that it's helpful to be able to not dwell on things that I can't control, but there's a way to do that that feels empowering, and there's a way to do that that feels somewhat melancholy and sad, as if I'm giving up.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you had any advice on how to make that as empowering as possible. To just think, okay, well, this person's going through something I don't understand, or everybody's stressed out. It's not my fault. If someone snaps at me, that's them. It's not me. Just, scenarios that come up. I just wondered how to deal with that in a more positive way.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the themes I keep talking about with people in the pandemic and is about grief and grieving. We're grieving how our world was. It likely, it's not going to ever be exactly how it was before. So we're grieving with a lot of loss and a lot of things that, have changed and might be this way again for the foreseeable future. If we start thinking about like the holidays or meaningful things that we enjoy, like you can't like pre-grieve them, but like we're probably gonna have to grieve those too, or expectations, or how things were, or I like, I think there's a part of it where you have to start with identifying it and being sad about it. And I think there's a place to go from grief to empowerment, though, that's not from grief to, being downtrodden, essentially. I think we have to identify the things that we've lost, have a time of being like, venting about it or being upset about it, letting it out. And then it kind of turns, I think, into more of a radical acceptance. Like it's not coming back. I work with a lot of patients, we talk about how like depression keeps us in the past, anxiety keeps us in the future, and staying in the present can be really difficult. But especially if there's something that we can't control, we can't change, the more time we spend, if we spend time ruminating about it or just being angry about it, that's really like thought garbage. Grieving can be productive if we let ourselves feel the thing, be sad about the thing, and then also kind of accept, all right, like how can I be, we use this phrase in clinical world a lot, like how can I be the best depressed person I can be? How can I be the best person in a pandemic with, my kids home, with work demands, like how, how can I do the best that I can? But also like how can I have some self-compassion for the things that I can't do, the things that I don't have time for, the things that I want to say no to. And I think another big aspect of the pandemic is really showing us what our priorities are, what we're willing to give our time to, what we are not willing to give our time to anymore, and realizing like that might be a good thing too, having those boundaries, asserting yourself, saying like, yep, this isn't what I want to be spending my time on, and I value myself and my mental health and my future and my happiness enough to give that up. So, that's kind of my long spiel of it, but I think we can shake our fist, but I think sometimes we have to just say, I'm really sad about this. This is a huge loss for me. Like, I love to travel. That just hasn't happened in a long time. I can go to some places around here, but like, I love to travel internationally. I usually go on 2 big trips a year. I realize like that's something I like to think about. I like to plan. I look forward to it. It recharges me. It's hard for me, I feel like, to disconnect from work and people unless I'm like away. So I had to grieve that. And it's not like it's never going to come back, but to grieve it, to accept it, and then to try to make some adjustments, like what could be adjacent or what's at the core of that traveling that really does help me to recharge, and can I kind of recreate some aspects of that in my life now?
And I was thinking about, what do I do to kind of identify the situations that I can feel empowered. So usually I try to pause and say, okay, what are my options here? If I don't really have many options, fine, then I have no control, and that's not going to be something that I can kind of keep thinking about it, right? But then if I have options and then I choose wisely after the fact, I realize if it was wise or not, I tend to figure out ways to reward myself for doing something that was difficult. And then particularly if it is like difficult for me is actually respect my limit as opposed to do something for others. Like I keep saying yes to everything for other people, and then I find myself, oh my God, my grant is due next week, and I haven't, even really polished it as much as I could. So every time that I am actually respecting something that I know that is challenging for me, I figured out a way to reward myself, be whatever it is, right? Something silly, but it shows kind of a compassion towards yourself that I think for me has been incredibly helpful. Naomi, you're muted.
I feel like I do that a lot. All I would say is thank you very much. That was very helpful. I think Sasha has her hand up. If you want to join in, Sasha.
Hi, guys. Hold on 1 second. I was actually just taking care of my own wellness and sitting on my front steps in the sunshine while listening.
Nice.
So. But I also want to echo the thank you to both of you, because you both have such wisdom to share. And I just wanted to reply first to Sina's question, which I think was really insightful and something that I can totally relate to. And I wanted to mention that I had a conversation with a friend yesterday who was saying, like, why are there just storms that keep brewing over me? Like I thought been through enough hardship, and now, this storm is brewing. And I was thinking that, like, well, if you don't have storms, like then you have drought, and then you have a wildfire. So like, and everyone is kind of going through the same or similar or different kinds, but also their own storms during those times. So to me, it makes me feel a little better, like, to think that that everyone has their own struggles, no matter who they are, no matter like how perfect they look on social media or whatever. Like everyone is going through something. And I also, Thea, I wanted to comment that I'm like so grateful for all the stuff that Penn does with Cobalt and all the resources that there are. And I'm just curious if anyone else on the call like if their institutions have similar programs that have arisen out of dealing with Cobalt and resources for staff and employee, or Thea, if you can comment on like how that came about, and maybe other institutions could potentially, adopt things like that to help.
I don't know if you wanted to leave it open for people to say if their institutions have done something, but I can definitely answer that question whenever you guys want me to.
Yeah, you can probably go ahead. I think some people are commenting in the group chat about their institutions.
Yeah, I mean, I think how it kind of got rolled out is that they like kind of sent out the bat call, like who wants to help be a part of a program like rolling out for people. And I feel like for me, that was, a real opportunity that I've wanted for a long time to bring mental health, in an integrated way across platforms. And so, we started with, we were doing some self-care groups that were just regular. And then we started rolling out these resilience groups. And I kind of don't even know, like, I think we're still trying to figure out, like, how people, and maybe Sasha, you can even answer how you heard about it and then how you decided to make one and how you decided to do it. But it's really been on a lot of the leaders in various teams and departments to make it a priority, and then to reach out to us and say, can we have one of these groups that you've advertised? And that's been really an awesome opportunity. But I think it shows that, UPenn is putting mental health as a priority, and there are mindfulness groups, there's resilience coaching. I led a few groups talking about, the racial violence that's ongoing, and those are still rolling out too. People can request those groups. And so, I think it's great if other institutions can find a way to maybe make a centralized location and have like a few different variations, like here's how you get in touch with a provider, but then here's also how you bring your team together. I think one thing about these resilience groups that's been great is it's bringing a lot of people together, and having everybody talk about mental health as a group. Again, really, we've never had a time where we're talking about mental health across these professional boundaries that we used to have, and it feels really great that we've been able to do that. So I think it is something that people are taking this archetype and trying to use it at other institutions, that we're really interested in helping to do that. And I think it is interesting to note, I'll just put this out there, that like at this point it is pretty much all volunteering, but I think they're trying to do it in a way that's sustainable for the long term and that will like be ongoing after COVID. And that's really why I'm so passionate about it, because I'm hoping that it's something that we can make mental health a normal part of your monthly meetings, or a normal part of what we talk about in the workplace. So that's kind of where I'm at about that. And I think Lisa Bellini is really kind of one of the main figureheads in all this, and so I think she's very open if people are talking about how could we use this model where I'm at.
Dr. Gallagher, I have a question. Do you think the virtual sessions for therapy is something that it is here to stay even past the pandemic? And what are the downsides? Because I keep thinking, once this is over, probably I should go back to face-to-face in-person therapy. But at the same time, it is so practical to actually, squeeze out every single minute of my day, and you just, I don't know, I feel very efficient to just jump into the therapy session, then figure out something else, and then go back in.
I mean, the N is going to be much bigger than it's ever been with virtual therapy. So the good news is I think we're going to have a lot of data on it. think some of the, again, preliminary data showing that there's not a huge downside to it. Various ages, it can get more difficult, just like they're saying, like Zoom school for little kids is not going to be as effective likely, but for adolescents, they think it can be really effective. Here's my take on it. You know, I'm similar to you. Like, I started seeing a therapist again during the pandemic, and I have loved that I can just fit it into my schedule. It's easy. I found a therapist I like, but she doesn't live close to me, so even going to see her, that would be a 3-hour journey every week. And so I actually found someone I really like, but isn't like, you know, it's easier to do it virtually, so I've really liked that. But I know that I miss seeing people in my life at work, but that's a different thing. And so kind of separating, is it that I want to see somebody, or is it that's like, if I could see my therapist and she's an essential worker, that'd be great. I think it's trying to distill that. And I think it is going to come down to some personality types. And, you know, some people just can't, you know, get past this, or they like that in person. It just helps them in a different way. I think we're going to find, like, you know, ADD and other things are going to have an impact on the virtual piece of it. But I will say, I do think a big part of it is going to be down to personality, what people like. But I think now that everyone's gotten used to doing more virtual stuff too, it's going to make it easier. But I think I do like the fact that we can fit it into our schedule more easily and make it like just a regular part of our life, so then it doesn't feel like a huge burden. So I am hoping that it continues. But I also am hoping, you know, that we have, like, I am excited to get back to having more social interactions. Even like, I miss my food truck guy, you know, like I want to get back to that eventually, some aspect of that, but it doesn't need to be with my therapist.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much. So it's just 4 o'clock now. So unfortunately, the session is over because we have the keynote speaker for NCS who's starting very shortly. So I know some people are jumping over to that session. I just wanted to say thank you both so much for coming and for speaking to us about this. It's such an important topic, and we've all learned a lot, and it's been great just to have a forum to discuss this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Reach out if you need anything.
Thank you.